A lot of moving pieces in the war in Ukraine at this hour. We're just learning from the Pentagon this afternoon that the United States is about to increase its training of Ukrainian soldiers, which means more U.S. military, mercenaries, and trainers in the field inside of Ukraine and beyond, also in Germany. Moscow overnight saying that the United States and what the United States is doing is putting us on a direct path for all-out war with Russia. That's coming from the Putin side. Then we have this Economist magazine interview with Volodymyr Zelensky and his regime. Really interesting interview because I think it really shows some major changes are underway. And we have this massive military offensive, which looks like it's about to be unleashed on Ukraine from the Russian side. For all of that and more, we want to bring in former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter to the show. Scott, welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
So I want to get into the winter offensive in a moment. I want to talk about this Economist magazine piece. But first, I want to start with what we're hearing from Russia, from Moscow, that the United States policies have put the U.S. and Russia on the brink of all-out war. And it sounds like from the United States side that they're ramping up this rhetoric instead of trying to tamp it down. What do you make of these words coming out of Moscow over the past 24 hours?
Well, I mean, we have to understand where the United States is coming from first. We're losing in Ukraine. I mean, we have doubled down. We've taken the mortgage, the kids' college fund, and everything, and we've placed it on a losing bet. We're going to lose. Ukraine will be defeated, and decisively. NATO will be humiliated, and the United States will be left holding the broken pieces. This is a reality. Now, what does America do for that? There's going to be a lot of rhetoric, of course, designed to shape a narrative. There's hope that somehow Russia can be persuaded to seek a diplomatic solution, an off-ramp to this conflict. And so rather than moderating their approach, rather than adopting the language of compromise, the United States is being very aggressive. The most recent aggressive move is the decision to provide Ukraine with Patriot surface-to-air missile batteries. But when you think about it, the first Patriot isn't going to show up on the battlefield for months. This war is going to be over by then. It's a meaningless gesture, and the United States knows it's a meaningless gesture. You'd have to train up an extraordinarily large number of Ukrainian forces. Each battery takes 90 men on the complexities of a system that doesn't work. Let's just be clear about the Patriot system. It doesn't work. It didn't work in the Gulf War, didn't shoot down any of Iraq's Scuds. It shot down more Allied aircraft during Operation Iraqi Freedom than Iraqi missiles, and it was unable to protect Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil fields from the Houthi drone attacks a couple years ago. The system has an abysmal combat record. Even if it did work, it could not be incorporated into the Ukrainian air defense network, which is a Soviet-era network right now being sort of patchworked with Western systems that are incompatible. There's no unified command and control, et cetera. So the Patriot will go in. It won't work. It will be destroyed. Ukrainians will die. This is the outcome. But from the Russian perspective, it's just one more example of the United States upping the ante. And from the Russian point of view is, to what end? Why does the United States keep doubling down on stupid, doubling down on failure? At some point in time, if you keep doing this, the trajectory leads to the inevitability of a conflict, a military on military contact between Russia and the United States, Russia and NATO. So I think Russia is doing its due diligence by calling the Americans out on this, saying this is a very dangerous direction that you're headed on. You might want to think twice about continuing down this path.
Zelensky and his whole regime sat down with the Economist magazine, which is, laughable. The Economist magazine, laughable in and of itself. So they get unbelievable access in this interview. To me, I mean, when I just sort of reading the tea leaves on this, you don't get access like this unless it's coordinated from somewhere, right? When you see this type of an interview happen, I've been around the news business a long time to know that when something like this happens, there's some coordination that's unfolded, right? There's something just like that Forbes or whatever it was, the Vogue photo shoot with Zelensky and his wife. So just your take on this. I mean, basically it seemed like a big PR move, this Economist interview, but there were some really interesting nuggets that came out of this interview. What was your take on this?
Well, first of all, the silence of Zelensky. He was present, but he wasn't a factor. The star of the interview was General Zelensky, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. He was the centerpiece of this interview, which speaks volumes about the precarious situation that Zelensky finds himself in today. You know, he's always been an artificial construct. He is not the Churchillian figure that the media has portrayed him to be. He's an empty suit, and now, you know, his usefulness appears to have run its course with Ukraine facing inevitable defeat. I keep coming back to this. Ukraine is losing, has lost, will lose. It's over. Everything's over except the dying. There's going to be a lot of dying. The West now, I believe, is recognizing that General Zelensky is the only hope for Ukraine, that at some point in time, he's going to have to squeeze Zelensky out of the way. And look at how the Russians have responded. They openly despise Zelensky. No Russian is talking about sitting down and negotiating with Zelensky anymore. Zelensky, on the other hand, who is no innocent. I mean, this is a man who took a selfie with Stefan Bandera's portrait in the background.
Right.
But the Russians say he's a man of honor. He's a good warrior. You know, he's put up capable resistance. His forces have fought bravely. I mean, they're saying all sorts of superlatives about this guy. Why? Because at some point in time, they are going to be sitting down with Zelensky to figure out an end to this conflict. It won't be a Western, dictated negotiation. It'll be the Russians dictating terms of surrender, but at least they'll have somebody that they can do business with. And so Zelensky, if you listen to his words, he was all but saying, this is what's going to happen. I mean, yes, he's cocky. I can beat these guys, he said. I can beat them. But in order to beat them, you got to give me 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces. In short, we have to give them an army. So you can't beat them. It sounded like there was that movie Downfall with Hitler in the bunker in the final days, moving imaginary German armies to defeat the Russians. And that's Zelensky. Where's Steiner? Where's Wink? Dude, you don't have an army because they're all dead, because the Russians have killed them all because of the stupidity of your president. And you know this. He basically said, if you don't give me this, and I understand you probably can't, then we're going to lose. And we need to prepare for that. That's pretty much what he said straight up. We're going to lose. The Russians, for the first time, you have a Ukrainian general saying, hey, the Russians know how to fight. This military they're bringing in is very capable, and they're getting ready to launch a big offensive. And we don't have anything to stop them. That's why we need 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, which you can't give us. Therefore, we're not going to stop him. That's my takeaway from The Economist. It is literally setting the stage for Ukraine, the inevitability of Ukraine having to accept dictated terms of surrender. The question now, is it going to be sooner rather than later? With Zelensky, it would always be later, because he is married to this extreme position of, we will only surrender once we recapture all the territory, drive the Russians out of Crimea, and capture Putin. I mean, he had one of his advisors saying, hey, we're going to cut Putin a break. When this is all over, we're going to try him, but we won't give him the death penalty. I mean, what kind of mushroom-driven fantasy is going on here? So The Economist, I thought, because it's a very influential, this was an interview done for the Americans, for the West. This was a setup for the West to shape the inevitability of a Ukrainian defeat. So that's the importance of it, because the Economist, I think you and I share a mutual loathing for the entity, but we have to acknowledge that within the Western media, establishment, empire, it is an influential outlet that people listen to. So when you have something like The Economist, which is normally leaning very right, very aggressive, very hawkish, taking the lead on an interview of this nature to set the future narrative of inevitability of Ukrainian defeat. It's a big deal.
Yeah,
as you said, it wouldn't have happened unless it was given the green light from not just Ukrainian sources, but Western sources. British, Americans said, we need that interview to occur now.
Right. Totally coordinated. That's what it smelled like to me. Piece of propaganda. I think you're right about that. It's really interesting. So Zelensky being pushed out. We even saw over the weekend at the World Cup, he recorded that message to be played at the FIFA World Cup, and the FIFA organizers just like, we're not going to play that video. Like, we're done with you now. We're done with your Zoom calls popping into these different events. So that brings us then to this big winter offensive. So overnight, we're seeing big moves into Donetsk. Of course, there's been massive attacks by the Ukrainians against the People's Republic of Donetsk over the past week and a half. Highest number of shells we've seen in a 24-hour period. So Russia moving in to that region. Of course, we've been waiting for this massive winter offensive for the ground to freeze. Where do you think we are with this winter offensive? Is this something, according to your sources, that this might happen before Christmas, after Christmas? And the numbers I'm seeing too, 1.2 million on the Russian side, ready to go, and upwards of maybe 200,000 on the Ukrainian side. This sounds like lopsided.
Yeah, I don't know how many the Russians have. That's a big number, 1.2 million. My guess would be closer to 700,000, but that's still a big number.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians, 200,000, I think, might reflect trained troops. They might be able to bump that number up to 500, 600,000 with untrained reservists, just raw meat to throw in. But the bottom line is, from a quantitative standpoint, we're looking at a slight Russian advantage in manpower, I believe. From a qualitative standpoint, it's hands down 100% on the side of Russia, both in terms of the numbers of equipment, kind of equipment, and frankly speaking, the methodology of employing the equipment. The Ukrainians are no longer capable of waging combined arms warfare. They don't have any ammunition for whatever artillery has survived. Their armored vehicles have been destroyed piecemeal. They're reduced to light armored vehicles and trucks and jeeps to move their people around. They have zero survivability on a modern battlefield. Russia, meanwhile, I mean, I always laugh when people say, Russia's running out of tanks. Russia's running out of this. Well, I don't know. Those are like T-90 M3, the most advanced tanks in the Russian arsenal, showing up on the battlefield by the hundreds. The same thing with their advanced infantry fighting vehicle, artillery. When the Russians said we haven't deployed anything for this fight, they meant it. Now the real stuff's coming in. I think their number one priority is securing the Donbass, completing the liberation of Donetsk, and then pushing the Ukrainians back at least 100, 120, 200 kilometers away from the frontier. So never again can a Ukrainian artillery shell strike the soil of the Donbass. Once that occurs, I think the Russians then will either pivot north or pivot south. My guess would be north, and the only reason why I say that is that the south is the last remaining hope for Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to be a modern nation state, it needs access to the sea. And Putin gave a press conference a couple months ago where he alluded to Odessa, the major port city, as being the centerpiece of either the termination of this conflict or the resolution of this conflict. So I don't imagine the Russians would shut the door on Odessa. I think they would go ahead and take care of the northern part, taking Kharkov, going to Sumy, I'll butcher the name, Chernogov or something, but securing these territories that are absolutely necessary. First, there's a significant Russian population there. Second, it achieves the goal of pushing the Ukrainians back away from the Donbass territory. And then they're going to give the Ukrainians the option to surrender. And if the Ukrainians take this option, and they're not going to have much time to think about it, because the last thing the Russians are going to do, I believe, is allow the Ukrainians a pause where they can receive new equipment. Once the Russians start this offensive, it's not going to stop. It's going to be a grinding. It'll be quicker than what's going on in Bakhmut. but it'll be a grinding, destructive tidal wave of violence that's just going to push the Ukrainians back, destroy them, and then they're going to pivot. Once they secure the north, they're going to pivot, and they're going to head south, and Zelensky is going to be given, in a matter of days, surrender. Surrender or die. Surrender or die. Literally, that's the only choice you have, surrender or die. And if he chooses not to surrender, then the Russians will kill him and the Ukraine. They'll sweep through the south, take Odessa, link up with Transnistria, and at that point in time, the military aspects of this campaign are pretty much over. And we're at the point right now, Zelensky admitted it to The Economist, there's nothing he can do to stop this. There is nothing Ukraine can do to stop this. Literally nothing. It is going to happen. And I would, to be honest, I'd feel more comfortable if the Russians did have 1.2 million troops, because that is sufficient troops to accomplish what I just set out. 700,000 can give you the north, but unless you destroy a significant part of the Ukrainian military, you start overextending your forces if you now move through the south. But if you have 1.2 million, then I'd say then this is an absolute certainty that that Russia will be able to accomplish this task.
Yeah, what's your timetable on this? Do you think we're already seeing some moves now in Donetsk, right? So we're already seeing to sort of more moving towards accomplishing that goal that you just talked about in Donetsk. Do you see? Are we talking a few weeks here? I think everyone's sort of sitting on pins and needles, wondering when this is going to happen.
First of all, the Russians aren't driven by the calendar like we in the West are. You know, a Christmas offensive, a New Year's victory. Right. They don't care about the calendar. It's simply they don't care. They will launch an attack when they have the resources available for the attack, not only to complete that mission, but whatever follow-on tasks are coming through. That's why we've been seeing the Russians accumulating these resources. And you don't bring all these forces to bear and then have them sit.
Right.
So, you know, and the movement of these forces into the Donbass, into Donetsk right now is important, because once that movement starts, it can't stop from a military standpoint. They're going to have to initiate action now. I think the Russians are going to be far more methodical than people think. I think a lot of people are anticipating a lightning victory. I'm not. I'm anticipating a victory that minimizes Russian casualties, maximizes Ukrainian casualties, and just blows them away piece by piece by piece. This unstoppable force that's just going to push the Ukrainians out and destroy them, and inflict casualties beyond imagination to them. But it's going to take time. I see the liberation of Donetsk. I see the pushing out into the north taking months, finishing sometime in the spring. And then I would say if Russia was to do the Odessa attack, we'd see that take place in late spring, be done by the end of summer. I see this war being over by the end of summer.
Yeah, and Putin said it would take a long time, so I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, we'll be watching this very closely. As always, Scott, great to see you here on the show. Thank you for your analysis, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. We really appreciate you being able to join us here on the show. We're thankful for your analysis throughout the year on this. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. And I want to call attention to something, so thanks so much, Scott. There's a video that just surfaced like a short time ago this afternoon. Vladimir Putin sitting down with the new head of the Donetsk People's Republic in Donbass, as well as Luhansk, and going over basically the numbers on the number of attacks that have unfolded over the past few weeks. And just watch like Putin's hand in this video. He's just like, we'll play it twice. And he's like, all right, tell me these numbers. Tell me these numbers. What's been happening here? And you can see that he's like, I don't know. To me, it seems like he's wrestling with something, like getting ready. And I think this video and these meetings that they made public today, I think that this is a bit of a PR move. I think that this is to show the rest of the world like what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. This massive offensive that's about to happen. I think this to me is clear video propaganda on the part of the Russians to show here's the genocide that's been happening in Donbass for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
Here's our justification for what's about to happen, which is going to be total destruction. So watch this little interview that he did with the Donetsk People's Republic acting head. Watch.
Но если брать только Донецк, только со 2 по 18 число у нас погибли 21 человек, 94 человека получили ранения, 460 домостроений.
Это
было повреждено.
жители, это мирные жители.
Это абсолютно мирные жители, то есть, и это, конечно же, вызывает очень серьезную, то есть, как бы, реакцию с нашей стороны, то есть, и наши подразделения делают, то есть, имеется в виду вооруженные силы Российской Федерации делают все возможное.
I don't know, I just see in his eyes like shit's about to hit the fan. Like, we've been warning you to stop attacking civilians, stop attacking schools, stop attacking hospitals, stop attacking churches, stop attacking all of us, and you haven't listened. And this is why we're here in the first place. And there's a separate piece, a separate interview that he did where Putin speaks and he says, look, the Western media will not cover this story. They haven't covered it for 8 years, the attacks in Donbass. They have not. They've ignored the genocide that's been unfolding there, the ignoring of the Minsk agreements. The West isn't covering it. The Western media will ignore this story. They have been ignoring the story. So interesting. And I think to me, that's a PR move. They're putting this out because that's what's about to happen. This is like the justification for it. We also got some new video this afternoon too of what Mariupol looks like. Now remember, Mariupol was like destroyed in Donbass. And remember, of course, then the Russians came in, and we showed you the video a few months ago where they brought in all of the construction trucks to start rebuilding. And so the Ukrainians have still been attacking with U.S.-made weapons, by the way, of course, U.S. and HIMARS weapons, attacking other parts of the Donbass and still destroying a lot of buildings. But here's Mariupol. Look at, this was, again, a few months ago, this was totally destroyed. This is the new... Sorry, I thought it was muted. So this is, this is all of the new...
How can that be?
Yeah, this is all the new apartment complexes they built in like the 3 months. So you can see the construction cranes down there at the end. They're still building more of them.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, anyway, just wanted to bring you an update on that. But I think that video is PR move. I think we're about to see shit is about to hit the fan.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, based on facts.
Okay.
Like, I say that, but it's not because like I'm seeing this. I'm just watching this. They release these videos. Something's happening here.
Did you happen to read that article I sent you through text earlier this morning about the Dutch reporter that got banned by the SBU because she wasn't pro-Ukrainian enough just for talking about stuff like this?
Yes.
Like just bringing up, she's like super neutral, and Ukraine was like, nope, you gotta leave.
Yeah, sorry, you're a Dutch reporter. So yeah, you're not going to push propaganda. You're out of here. You're out of here. You're banned. And they've banned all these. Again, that's why if you're like CNN or these other news stations, you're fine to be there because you will put out their propaganda. But of course, Ukraine has taken control of the state-run media, so they've squashed all independent media voices, and so again, they're going to get pushed out of there. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.